Here's a quick look into today's episode. What I want people to know and think is, if there's a problem, if there's a difficulty, if there's a fight, I can call on Williams. He'll be there and he'll be all in. You guys text me, you call me, I'm picking up the phone, I'm taking action. Are you ready to go? Have you gotten enough reps and sets that you're lethal so when the nation calls you to fight and win our nation's wars, you can provide lethal and ready formations and lead them. Train them, fight them, and win. 90% anticipation, 10% luck. The reps and sets you've had through your career, they generate that context. It's what we do. There's a certain amount of humility and knowing yourself, knowing your unit, but you got to be able to have those conversations. Because at the end of the day, it's about the people and winning, elevating risk, having those dialogues. I mean, I can't stress that enough.
Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership. And not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Today's episode is with Kevin Williams. For those of us who know him, this conversation will sound very familiar because he's not only been sharing his warfighting mentality, he's been living it. I'm personally so lucky to spend so much time with him, to compile his thoughts into one conversation and share that with you. I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Kevin Williams.
I became a meme for the formation, both as a battalion commander and brigade commander. Like, think about Ren doing a Warrior 6 rendition. What did he do? He put camo paint on, usually had a dip in, a Diet Coke, but the words coming out of his mouth were, hey, listen up. It's all about being lethal. Over and over and over again. And I used to laugh, and everyone would look at me if I was going to get upset. I'm like, no, because that is, right? Mm-hmm. That is important. And the funniest story, so Ren was a squad leader for me in No Fear. And you may know him, so one of my lieutenants, Ando, he's out now. He's one of my number one PLs. We're at JRTC. And he, again, Ren does this great rendition. It's in the dark. We're like 4 kilometers from target. It's not, I decided to dismount with the companies. Flynn's looking for me. He was a CG at the time. It's like, where's Williams? Why isn't he in his talk? And we reached this open area. We got about 1.5 kilometers to go. And I'm like, Ando, come here. And, you know, I'm up with the lead company, but I'm just in the dark. Yeah. I'm like, hey, you need to bound them. And he's looking at me. He didn't know what I'm saying, but I'm like, I'm really saying traveling Overwatch. Let's go into some contact is likely. But he literally interprets it like, oh, shit, he wants us to 3 to 5 second rush. So they start bounding. And I'm like, oh, dude, come back here. Bounding over us. But yes, dude, contact is like, but the point being, back to company commanders and your kids, that clarity of saying something, but then defining it, you remember it. Yeah. I remember my dad talking about, and I've brought this up in many speeches, and I was floored because it was the first time he was looking at me as a man. It was my commissioning. And he said, hey, the American people are counting on you to complete the mission and bring as many of their sons and daughters home. Mm. And so never before that, he was very introverted. You know, he's a Navy commander. We looked up to him. He was the Crown Jewel Naval Academy graduate. But, you know, in all the celebration, him looking at me and telling me that. And I'm like,
wow,
whoa, you know? Mm-hmm. And the second, he goes, it was a great career, but I sacrificed you, your brother, and the family to do what I did. Mm. And he goes, you need to always keep that in the back of your mind. And it's crazy. This was 1997. How true are both of those statements?
Right.
This is a Navy pilot. And to your point, and, back to company commanders, your kids, your ability to communicate to them, it sticks with people.
Yeah. That's what they remember.
Right?
Yep.
And that's why I love when you say you maybe not the words, but you remember how you feel or what you took from it. And that's kind of life, you know? So when we start talking about, my regret about I wasn't doing it early enough, my company commanders, my platoon leaders knew more about what I thought was important and how they could get better than my own children. So
yeah, it's time to change
right?
a little bit.
And that's why I say, you looking at the kids, that's victory. If you do nothing else in your life, right? And I know we're going to talk about what keeps you in, the texts from the team, you guys reaching out, like that's matters.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's your kids too. They're in that bubble now.
That kid, that's our kids, that's our tribe, right?
Right.
And it's our tribe of people.
That's right. And they're built just like everybody else.
Yeah.
They are the ones, and I know I probably said this at your chain of command, and, I meant it. I'm like, hey, the greatest compliment we could pay each other is like, I want to be in a fierce battle with you against overwhelming odds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go.
That's a great segue. Like that what you just said right there is like, when I wrote down on my piece of paper, like, what's the conversation with Kevin Williams going to be about? It's going to be about our tribe, and it's going to be about the people that are like us and the people, our families, the people that understand where we come from, what we're going, what we're trying to do. And you instantly know, like, that person it could be part of my tribe. And I feel like I could fit into that tribe, right? So the whole thing, that's kind of the spoiler alert, right? Is like, what are we going to talk about? It's going to be all about tribe. But when I heard the news that you were getting ready to leave in a couple weeks, you told me that just 2 days ago, and you were like, yeah, I'm leaving. When? 2 weeks. I was like, we got to get together on Sunday morning and we got to record this. We need to get together and have the conversations that me and you have been having for years now so that we can share it with as many people, not just our kids, not just the people that are in our direct chain of command. But I think it's sharing some of those thoughts so people can hear them and be like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Or I've heard it that same way. I've just heard it said a little bit different. And then they're like, yeah, I'm on the right track. You're hearing those same things from a tribe that I'm not even a part of, but I want to be, or I feel like that is what I'm looking for, right? Going forward. Let's kind of go backwards a little bit and start with, what is it that you hope when people hear Kevin Williams? Like, have you thought about, like, this is what I hope people think. This is what I hope people feel when they hear your name?
Wow, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I know now there is more behind me than in front of me as far as this career. And that's freeing, but you are reflective. Like a PCS move comes up, you're doing your own internal after action review, right? I think it goes back to what I was just telling you earlier. What I want people to know and think is, if there's a problem, if there's a difficulty, if there's a fight, I can call on Williams. He'll be there. And he'll be all in. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to live that way. You guys text me, you call me, I'm picking up the phone, I'm taking action. Which I think is tied to, we've talked about this all the time, and this comes from our tribes, our Venn diagrams of tribes. It's not just rank, but using your experience, your position, your axis for good. And so I think, if you were to walk away, it is that, right? Hey, man, if there's a fight, if I need something, I can count on Williams. He'll be there.
Yeah, I can tell you there's not just me, but so many people, they think about you, that's what they think about. Whether it's trying to get Hunter back from college, trying to get him back here for the holidays, to be with the family, and us getting the runaround somewhere on post. And within 24 hours, as the chief of staff, you were like, you had that fixed. And next thing you know, Hunter's got a ticket and he's coming home, right? Because we were at JRTC, and I was in the box, and I was finding out about that. Whether it's that to PCS orders or bringing somebody new back out to the island, it was like you always knew I had somebody, out there that I could reach out to. Even though you're not huge on email, you're more than you used to be. Right. But a text message away, and I knew within 24 hours I was going to get a response, no matter where you were, even if you were on the island. I knew I was going to get a response from you. It was going to be like a thumbs up or something like that. Why did you join the Army in the first place? Like, what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind?
Yeah, it is amazing that I've ended up here. I'll tell you, we're talking about your kids. I was a rough kid. So I'm a Navy brat. My dad was in the Navy, naval aviator. And we were definitely traveling all the time. I really didn't know what he did, though. I mean, kind of wrapped up in my own thing. Had been around Navy, Marines my entire life. We were forward in Subic when we still owned that place. My dad shut it down. So I remember I was 16 and my dad was leaving. He had a training command in Moffett Field in Mountain View when we used to own that. It's like a federal airfield now. And he got up on stage. And, we had been to ceremonies before, but I'm watching him speak and the eloquence, and he's up there, Vietnam vet. And I'm having this realization for the first time in my life, like what he'd been doing. And then the guy who was taking over went up there, but not as crisp, you know. And so I'm seeing my dad for the first time in this different light. Like, the words are sinking in. I never forget, he came off stage, and I was not a good kid. And I found it in myself to go up to him, and I said, I'm proud to be your son. And then I'm like, I think I want to do something like this.
How old were you?
15, 16. Like end of my sophomore year. At that point, I go, what? I think I want to do something like this. And, and I can use all the big words and we can talk how that changed over time, what I wanted to do. But it wasn't the Army. It's just, I kind of felt like I wanted to serve. So I developed in my mind, and the aspirational goal then was, well, I want to go to the Naval Academy. Right? My dad went to the Naval Academy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to start getting involved. I got to be part of clubs. I started looking up. I'm like, I am nowhere near what they are looking for, right? Like, yes, I was a wrestler, varsity athlete, but I didn't do anything else. Yeah. Like my vision of me at that point was like, I was going to go wrestle.
Were your grades okay?
They were okay.
Okay at best. Yeah.
Okay at best. So that really was a big turning point for me. But saying that to him was like a catalyst. And so I started like hitting the books. I kid you not. It was that moment because, I lived to work out and wrestle. And then at that point, I'm like, I can't. When I saw the prereqs for some of these people getting to the academies, I'm like, oh,
I better get moving.
Like clubs, what's that? So that was a huge turning point for me. So fast forward, and it's pretty funny, I think about parents nowadays. We're so involved with Owen, well, Carrie is. My dad is kind of very simple. He's like, hey, do the work. But there was no checking on it. So I really had to internalize all this. Like, this wasn't them telling me. As a young man, I'm like, how do I do this? Yeah. And so I really buckled down. I'd sent applications. So the following year, your junior year is big year. So like I locked in. Took AP courses, talked to my teachers, got my GPA to a point where it was competitive. So applied. And, so now in my mind, I'm thinking I want to be my dad, right? It's like you emulate closest to the boat. But in the back of my mind, okay, well, if I don't do that, I'll be a Marine.
Is he out now or is he still in?
He passed away, but he got out in 92.
At that point.
Yeah, he's still in. He's still active.
Junior, he's still in.
He's still in. He's still active. That would be his last assignment. He'd go on to the postgraduate school. So now I'm like, what do I do? So I put applications together for Naval Academy and Air Force Academy because I'm like, well, I'll fly like my dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Be a pilot.
That's what he was? He was a pilot?
Yeah, he was a pilot. So, just so happened too in that time period, Top Gun had just come out. So we'd watch the movie with him and we're like, oh my gosh.
Ryan did the same thing. He wanted to be a F-14 pilot.
Right. So, I apply, and it just shows how crazy it was back then. And I did apply to other schools too, right? UC Santa Barbara, all the UC schools, Arizona State, just wide swath. So a couple of things happened though. I had gotten hurt my sophomore year. I had tore my Achilles. And we'll talk about grit a little later, I can't run. So in the prime time of setting the stage for my athletic prowess, I'm hurt. And I'm coming back from nothing. So this is happening while I'm applying myself.
You're recovering.
I'm recovering. Rehab. So I'm like, oh. So anyway, send these off. First letter comes back. I get into the Air Force Academy. I don't even tell my parents. I'm like, well, I don't really want to do that. I want to go to the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
So I set that letter aside. Hilarious. I get into UC Santa Barbara. I get into Arizona. Well, I get a letter from the Naval Academy, and it's not the one you want. It's like, hey, we looked at you. We do want you, but, you probably need to come to our prep course.
Go to the prep school.
Yeah, all this stuff. I'm like, ugh. So I had a big decision there. So I decided, okay, I'm going to, because, you could reapply.
Right.
I go, I'm going to go to UC Santa Barbara. I'm going to do a year there. I'm going to join whatever program is there. And so I can build my file. Then I'll reapply. That was the whole plan. So fast forward later, I'm at Santa Barbara. I'm doing I'm sticking with the Marine Corps early entry program, the Bulldog program. They didn't really have a program there, but you just talk to local guys. We do PT.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I'm running on Santa Barbara one day doing PT, and I see some dudes in some Army uniforms. And of course, we're making jokes like, look at these Army guys. And one of the answers, I never forget, Sergeant Harris, he was the senior E7 there at the ROTC program. He saw me, and he comes and tracks me down, runs me down. It's like, hey, what are you guys doing? And we're talking smack. It's like, hey, we do PT every day here. You guys should try it out. I'm scoffing. I'm like, the Army? I mean, all I remember about the Army is like Private Benjamin. I'm like, Army. But that was the beginning, because I start doing PT with them, and I'll never forget, the recruiting officer was brilliant. He retired as a Colonel Bob Huntley. He saw something in me. And so they're really putting it on hard. Like, hey, no pressure. You should come to our labs. You should participate. It'll make you better. Mm-hmm. You want to go off and do this Navy thing, And this is how they got me. I met my first airborne ranger, Doug Spear. He was a green to gold from 275, E5 team leader in Panama. And they had a plan. So their brilliance was, after about a month of doing this, they're like, hey, do you want to go to jump school this summer? I'm like, of course. And you know how hard it is to do that in those.
It's hard enough when you're in. It's another thing when you're not even in.
I'm a non-contracted cadet. They in-process me for that summer. I mean, I don't even know the difference between a first sergeant and a sergeant first class.
Yeah.
And they sent me off to Benning that summer. And that was the beginning of it all. Go there. I'm loving it. Getting smoked. Somehow I got confused in populations. They put me with privates and NCOs, which was great. That's how I spent my 3 weeks. I wasn't with the cadets. And I came back, and I'll never forget coming home, and my dad pulled me aside and goes, how was it? I go, yeah, I loved it. And he goes, hey, it's okay. It fits your personality. You do not need to go to the Naval Academy. And that's really how it started. And so I went all in. And the Army got a great deal because they didn't contract me on scholarship until I got a 2-year.
You didn't contract till junior year.
Yeah. So it was free chicken. I'm doing all the things, like, what else can I do?
Yeah, and they got to do a full assessment on you before they have to start paying.
So that was brilliant. But, and so thereafter, when I graduated, my dad commissioned me, and it was off to the races.
Yeah. So you signed up there at UC Santa Barbara. You knew a little bit about Fort Benning because you went to airborne school. But then how fast between you graduate to off to Fort Benning for infantry officer basic?
Yeah, it was great. So
and why did you choose infantry?
So back up a little bit. So when I go to airborne school, you know, what attracted me, that I'm like, man, these guys are tough. Like, that's a challenge. You know, young kid first going. I mean, it wasn't hard, but like the mental, you know, I'm watching people like complaining about the runs around Benning, and when they don't tell you you're going to end it, people are falling out. I'm like, who are these people?
Yeah, we're going to do another lap,
like,
and all
oh
of a sudden
gosh.
everybody
And
falls
like,
out.
But, you know, to back it up, so after that, my next side is like, I need to go to air assault school. How do I do that? And there was a competition at the school. I'm like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And I did the Pie-Eating, you know, Club Ranger Challenge. I was all in on that, right? So those two steps. But yeah, back to your point, why did I choose infantry? When I'm going off to camp, I'm like, what else would I do? And no insult to anybody else, but I'm like, I am doing this. I wanted to be a pilot, but if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be an infantryman.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be a ranger, and that's it. Because I was offered, you know, at the end, they're like, hey, you can pick aviation, military intelligence. I was the only one who commissioned infantry in my class.
Yeah, you said not a lot of people come out of UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah, UC Santa Barbara is not a big infantry producing school. Nothing wrong with that. So yeah, timeline wise, you know, I get my commission. It's in summer of '97. I then have one of probably the unsung greatest jobs. I become the gold bar recruiter, right? I'm a lieutenant just walking around campus.
That. I did the same thing.
And
loved it.
And also I ran the rappel class. So I became rappel master, and we had cliffs there, 2-unit class. So I was loving life for 6 months. So do that. But yeah, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was very lucky. My PMS, my first 2 years, was an infantry officer. You know, the individual I'd mentioned, you know, he was a big factor in that, because, you know, I think one thing that we did that really challenged me, we would pull out Ranger Handbook every week, and a small team of us were doing patrolling every weekend outside the FTX. Like, I did that all the time, small unit tactics. And, you know, just, it was a challenge, right? The physicality. So that was that. So, you know, go off to Benning, go through OBC. So yeah, there was no doubt in my mind. And to a point, you know, when I was talking about, you know, injuries, I had something happen my senior year, which, you know, I had to get through as well, because that ankle would never be the same. And I remember in my mind, I'm like, yeah, if this doesn't work out, I am not going to be in the Army.
Yeah.
Right?
Because this is why I joined.
It's why I joined. If I can't do that, then I'll go do something else. Like, which I think is important for our people. Like, you put a goal, you got to go all in.
Yeah. I think that's important for people that have been doing it for a minute, is that when people ask for your advice, they're like, hey, what do I need to do? Right? You often get like cadets or people that are considering to go into the Army, or they're brand new lieutenants, right?
Yeah.
And they ask us and they say, hey, what's your advice going forward? And the tendency is to give them advice on things that you're doing right now, or things that you're doing in the first 5 years. But I've been recently trying to say, what were we doing when we were cadets? What were we doing? What did I do at ROTC? Just like you, you know, even though I had been prior service, I had to start over as a cadet. I had to start over as a second lieutenant and do second lieutenant things, right? But you got to rewind yourself back to what you were doing. And I think the way you just described, like, you had to be all in. You had to, how do I be number one on the OML to go to air assault school? How do I number one to go to airborne? How do I do exactly what the privates and the sergeants are doing at airborne school? You know, because that's what benefits you, I think, as you get older. Because now that foundation is in there, that you learned how to do it precisely right. Yeah. It's perfect.
Yeah, you have to be hungry. And so this was asked of me of one of our platoon leaders. It's like, well, what was driving you? I'm like, I just looked, I had like the officer guide. Because again, I didn't come from an Army family. And I'm looking at like, wow, look at this badge. What do you get that badge for? Because I just wanted credibility. So I was hungry. I joined the color guard. I joined Ranger Challenge. I joined everything they had to offer, because I wanted to be exposed. Yeah. And in junior year, when I knew that, so I did go to air assault school after camp. Funny enough, I came here. It was like one slot to come out to the Lightning Academy back in the day. But I was hungry, and then I'm like, hey, can I get my EIB too somewhere? Yeah. I mean, I was all in, right? So I think that's important because a lot of people, and I love this, and I do this with my counseling. Where do you see yourself 5 years, 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I'm like, I just want to do all these things.
Yeah.
So if I step foot into a unit, I'm credible.
Yeah, you were starting to have this intuition. I think you were already starting to see this vision, this idea of where you wanted to be and what you wanted to do and what needed to be done to be successful. And you were already thinking about it. Not wait until you got there to find out that you should have went to airborne school before you showed up. You know, you were doing those things ahead of time. I think that's a kind of a little indicator on the things that we'll talk about later about intuition and about how your ability to see those things before they even happen.
Yeah, and there was some additional funny pressure, you know. So, you know, Carrie and I, we started dating in college after. Like, we were in the program together the last 2 years, adversarial competition. Yeah. We didn't really, we made a decision. We really didn't do anything, you know, talk to each other until after I graduated and she was in her 5th year. Right? But funny enough, her father-in-law, Airborne Ranger, MACV SOG, I'll never forget like visiting his house before I go to OBC and I see the little Mahinga swamp, or excuse me, you know, he was a RI in Florida.
That's Carrie's dad.
Yeah. And I'm like, that was another good motivator. I'm like, I can't be around this family without my Ranger tab. Like, no way. No way, man. But I was very fortunate. So coming out of OBC, did very well, was able to go to Pathfinder school, and then I went to Ranger school. And then it was a quick turn, maybe a month, and then I reported to Panama, and then it was go time.
Yeah, what unit was that back then? Because not everybody's familiar with Panama,
so, you know,
being, you know, an actual unit.
Yeah, we had, by the time I got there, it was a separate battalion, 587 Infantry. Excuse me. But pretty fascinating. You know, that unit was kind of like a diamond in the rough. And the only reason I got kind of laid that way, our senior TAC officer, Captain Soriano, he was an infantryman coming out of, he was an OCT at a NTC, you know, observer controller, and he had commanded in Panama. And so when I was laying out where I was going to go, of course, not knowing most, you're like, yeah, 82nd, 101st. She's like, listen, you need to go to Panama. Like, it's the wild, wild west. Like, all you do
Camp Sherman?
It was Fort Kobe, but yeah, you know, I would then go on to go to the General Operation Training Center there at Sherman. Okay. Multiple times. Funny story, 7 days after arriving as a PL, we deployed the entire battalion there. I mean, that was
to Sherman.
Yeah, that was my
out into the box.
That was my first rep. So I was very lucky in that I knew, he's like, listen, you go there, small unit tactics, you know, used to be called Ranger South out there. If you remember.
I think in my first 4 years in the Army, I went to Panama 4 times.
Yeah.
I jumped in there three of the 4, I think 3 out of the 4 times, maybe all 4. But that was one of the first places I did not, you know, growing up, I did not know. Like, people had jumped into Panama, like that's what the Rangers had done. But they said, hey, we're jumping into Panama. They didn't tell us it was real or fake. They just said, we're going to go jump into Panama. And I was like, oh my God, right? As a private, and you come out in like thigh high, you know, grass out there. Yeah.
And so, you know, that super good. And, you know, and back in the day, I remember getting a note from the battalion commander. I think I got it when I finally told them that's where I wanted to go. It was like too easy. But I remember getting a note from the battalion commander, and he's like, yep, we got a slot for you, but you better graduate Ranger school. That was the last line. So a lot of good incentive. Yeah. But, you know, that was how it used to be back then. Yes. Right? You weren't doing anything without those credentials.
Yeah.
But, that was very formative. You know, just another line. This is really what taught me about light fighting. Because, as you know, going there, those conditions there, it's all small unit tactics. Mm-hmm. Like, you start to realize you cannot see everyone, you can't talk to everyone. And, you know, I think that experience definitely shaped my leadership style, and that you're never going to know everything. And the amount of trust you need to put in subordinate leaders, And, I was super lucky. I mean, my squad leaders ran their units. They ran their units. I'll never forget, of course, I had a great rep go to the Jungle Operation Training Center as a brand new platoon leader, get them through that. And then I think I'm off to Paraguay on a deployment. And because we used to do that back then, if you remember, that theater security cooperation stuff. The platoon, we're taking them all over the place, almost like pathways here.
Yeah, just like
And so I'm a second lieutenant. Do that, validation exercise, and now I'm off to another country. But yeah, I think as I reflect back, the imperatives of physical and mental toughness, not having a clear picture, but fighting through that, right? Like we would disaggregate, like squads would patrol to link up points to bring the platoon together, and then we'd fight, right?
Yeah, because it was, you just kind of glossed over 3 or 4 different things, but like you'd put people into the jungle. You'd say, I'll see you in 48 hours at the following location. Right. We'll link up there. And you wouldn't communicate with some people.
That's
right. Your higher headquarters, like, right, your platoon was out there with your iodine tablets and your sling rope, right? Go find a river, like to fill up on water. You're not going to get resupply. You better be physically fit, because I don't know how we would evacuate you, if you did.
Oh,
you had, you had one sat phone in the event that you had to evacuate somebody. So all those things became way more real when you're in those kind of conditions.
Yeah, think about, I'll never forget. So our comms window is this hour, once a day. That's how we're going to talk to hire. Everything else, it's on you. Like think about that, our current state right now, where you need, or we're asking for instant situational awareness. So that foundationally changed how you led, and the amount of trust. We talk about it that you had to have in your junior leaders, your team leaders, your squad leaders. So foundational for me, because you can't control it. Mm-hmm. You got to give guidance. You got to do your part, but they've got to fight on their own until you mass again to go. And that would stick with me, I mean, to this day, because right, it's about risk. It's about trust. It's about being comfortable with uncertainty and being uncomfortable.
Amen. You talking about, I didn't think about it this way until you just said it, which was, your leadership style and how you are as a leader starts to kind of grow over time. But just thinking back to that, like our company jumped in, or the battalion jumped in, but the companies went in 3 different directions. One went, this way, one went that way. And it was like, we were going to meet up on this final objective in 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
We had company objectives along the way, and then we had this battalion objective. And if you didn't get there 4 or 5 days from now, like the battalion would be unsuccessful. But all I saw was my platoon leader and platoon sergeant. I didn't see the company.
Right.
I just said, we're on this route. We got to get there. We got to do our thing in a couple days. And that just became the way I thought it was always going to be.
That's right.
It was always that way everywhere. And it was always going to be that way all the time.
Right.
I've always been thinking about that.
Yeah. And so what I developed from that is that the amount of responsibility that you have as a young leader, it's real. Mm-hmm. Then you take this platoon to some foreign country and you're the senior on the ground, partnering and running ranges. And, it was, again, of course, you're biased because that was my path. But I'll tell you, I think it really set me up for understanding risk and making decisions. Like I said, in that triple canopy, I couldn't raise the company commander unless it was pre-coordinated. So 24 hours, one of those hours, I may get them as we run a jungle antenna up to the canopy, using a plugger and some, big old radio with a Kick 15 on it that you're carrying on your back. You may or may not get them. It's really like, he told us we needed to be here. That's what we're doing. In the absence of orders, execute. And, the difference from going from there, and then I would go into, the mech world where you could see everyone, and get a feel. It really changes how you view the fight.
Yeah.
When
you left Panama, where did you go next?
Yeah. So really interesting story. So, this, we had a lot of opportunity, like most young infantrymen, I wanted to do everything. Right. And it just so happened, Carrie was coming out of flight school. And so she had been in Alabama.
Were you guys married now?
Yeah.
Okay.
She had been in Alabama when I was in Panama. And so, we're like, well, shoot, we gotta lash up somewhere. So she gets assignment orders to Fort Hood. And I'm like, oh, what? Because again, I'm like, I'm a light fighter.
Yeah.
Right? But it was actually, and I know we've talked about with our field grades, it made me better, right? So I did the mech transition, end up at Hood, and, I got mech and light as a JV lieutenant captain under my belt. So I'll never forget, I showed up and, General Bob Brown was the battalion commander. And I remember walking into his office, so by that time I feel pretty good, right? I'd earned my EIB in Panama. I've got Air Assault Airborne Pathfinder, walk into his office. I'm like, yeah, he's.
So you were first lieutenant.
Yeah.
How long were you first lieutenant? Or how long were you a lieutenant, period?
Shoot, up until what? 99? 2000 maybe? Anyway, I don't remember. It was pretty short, but yeah, I showed up. I'd done about 18 months. So, I still got
18 months in Panama.
Yeah, I still got time.
Got it.
Show up, and I'm like, okay. If he asks me, I'm like, I know nothing about mech, but I want to be the scout PL. So I sit up there, and he's like, Kevin, I know you're going to feel like we're going to F you here, but you're going to be the B mount. I'm like, what is that? I had no idea what he just said. So the XO grabs me. He starts walking me down, Fort Hood back then, the motor pool roll, it's amazing, because you both had 1st Cav and 4th Infantry Division there at the time, that motor pool roll. And so we're walking past the battalion toward the motor pool. I'm like, am I the permanent staff duty? Like, the only reason I would check on a motor pool back when I was a lieutenant was like to check on the 4 trucks. So we walk into the motor pool, and I'm seeing all these, platforms. And I'll never forget, I think it was a 113. And I'm like, just to show you how ignorant you are, you're like, is that a tank? And the exit like scoffs at me. It's like, pats me on the head. So I walk into the maintenance bay, and it's like, I meet a CW3, Chief Picott, who retires in E5, my master sergeant. He's like, this is your office. And then he left. And I probably make this up in my head, but I've got my jungles on, my spits and starches, carrying my rucksack. And they're just looking at me like, sir, welcome. And I'm like, what is a BMO? And then we would go on to do some good things, but pretty funny.
How long were you the BMO?
So yeah, I was the maintenance officer for a year, and talk about foundational. We deployed the battalion to NTC, and I drew the Zero Fleet. So imagine going from Panama now. Now I'm at NTC. I'm the maintenance officer, and I'm trying to draw the fleet for NTC, get the OR rate up, and go.
Oh my God.
And so the spectrum there.
Yes.
Now, don't get me wrong. The UMCP was like in a triangle shape with guns at the apexes. Like, I brought some security.
Yeah.
But foundational. So, you have to change your brain. You have this picture of yourself like, I'm a fighter. What is this? But it's growth.
Yeah.
And so the team was very appreciative because, I'll never forget, though, I would jump the UMCP like every 24 hours. I'm like, we will not get compromised to a point where the OC and my chief are like, sir, we got to do some maintenance. We appreciate you keeping us alive, but we have to start turning wrenches. I'm like, all right, I got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, go to NTC, do all that. And it's funny how your mind shifts, right? Because you have this picture of yourself, but you grow, right? You grow through position. The things that made you a good first or platoon leader, you start to realize I need other skills.
Yeah.
And it's funny when I get done with that turn, General Brown asked me, so what do you want to do? You still want scouts? I'm like, no, sir. I want to be an XO.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Growth.
Yeah. Second in charge of a company.
I'm past that stuff now.
Yeah. I'm done being platoon leader.
Yeah.
I want to go be.
I want to help. And so that assignment at Hood, I mean, I tried to do everything. I was a company XO. We would then deploy for Desert Spring and Kuwait. You know, we always had a stand up there. So I went to do that, drew an APS fleet for the company, did all that stuff. Again, another funny inflection point as I'm coming out of that. Now the team's like, yeah, Kevin can probably be an AS3. And I'll never forget, JB Burton, one-star General Burton retired. He had just taken over the battalion. And I remember we're coming out of Kuwait. He's like, hey, same thing. What do you want to do next? You want to be the AS3? And I'm like, sir, I think I want to be the 4.
Yes.
I mean, right? Because that learning that I'd gotten from that, it's just making me better. Right. So if you put that all together, I've done the BMO, XO, I was an AS3 for a while. I'm like, make me the 4 because I need to know this stuff.
Right.
Right. So we're in Kuwait. I get to, run the company as the 2IC, do a bunch of great stuff out there. But, this really, again, as I was giving guidance to our company commanders, you want to be a good warfighter, you need to understand all this. It's going to make you better at the tip of the spear. And, I share this one story. If I had never done that rotation in the mech world, I would have lost a fight that would be coming in 2010. And it's where we were the surge battalion in Afghanistan. And because of my experience in mech, my understanding of employment of MICLICs, I would then use that experience in the Arghandab River Valley to save lives.
Yeah.
Because it made me better. Or OAF-1, when I knew the capabilities of a tank and 166 armor was available, and I'm like, we need them as tasks organized to us, right? So,
yeah. It's two things. It's like you said, like you wouldn't be the leader that you are if it wasn't for those experiences. But here it is again, though. You created those experiences. Yeah. So, like, I'm also convinced, like, if they would have sent you somewhere else, you would have created those experiences. So if you didn't go to mech, you would have went to a light unit, you would have went to the 101st then, you would have said, I want to be an XO, I want to be S4, I want to, you still would have done those things because your vision, again, you're seeing these things, you have a sense for what it is you need to do in the future and what you want to be. Yeah. Like, I feel like you would have created that no matter where you went. And so too often, sometimes people go, well, that's the way you did it. So that's the way everybody needs to do it.
Right.
So everybody needs to have this exact same experience.
Yeah. And that is dangerous. And don't get me wrong, because, so at the tail end of that time, when I'm the 4, we get back from this deployment to Kuwait, 9/11 happens, which also is another paradigm shift, right? And I will tell you, not forgetting where I'd come from, wanted to be the most credible, experienced person. I had, it was my first big decision. I literally was considering, because, as soon as that kicks off, the world changed for all of us.
For all of us, forever.
And I'm like, I need to get in the fight.
Where were you at 9/11?
So we had just gotten back. I was at Hood. I was the 4. Just so happened we're doing a field exercise too. It was hilarious. I think I was running a LRP. Was going out to make sure the BMO and the support platoon leader were giving fuel or something. Yeah. And it came up, and I remember us coming back to the talk, and then we were kind of told what was going on. But I'll never forget. First thing on my mind is like, I got to get in the fight. How am I doing that? And I kid you not, like 4 days later, I'm calling infantry branch and saying, hey, how do I do this? And, you know, I'd asked them about how do I get into SF right now? And by this point, I'm a captain.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Pre-company command.
yeah, I'm a JV captain
career course.
I'm like, well, you know, quickest way is, you know, the SF is deploying in. You got, you know, objective rhinos just going on, all this stuff going on. I'm like, all right, how do we do it? And never forget, Branch is like, brother, it's too late. Like, the year groups are filled. Like, you're going to the captain career course. And I'm like, what if I resign my commission?
So you can go in as an NCO.
Yeah. And then be an 18 X-ray. Like, yeah. So anyway, right. But again, my thought is like, I need to get in the fight, you know, not knowing what I didn't know. And so I went through all that until like a senior leader pulls me aside. It's like, listen, there's going to be more than enough time. You need to go do this stuff. But I mean, I remember looking at emails about this a couple of years ago, the interchange between me and Branch about.
Yeah. I think that when you just said that, I think that a lot of people right now are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
I think a lot of junior officers and a lot of NCOs right now are saying the same thing. How do I get into the fight?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's upon us as older folks to say, you shouldn't feel that way. Because you felt that way, and I felt that way.
Yeah.
Like when 9/11 happened and I was walking down the halls of Armstrong Atlantic, I knew that my friends that I just left from the Ranger Battalion were going to be jumping in really soon.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be with them.
Right.
And it was really hard to say, finish your college degree and go back out to the Army as a second lieutenant.
Right.
Like that, those thoughts were going through my head too. And so that's what's going through the heads of a lot of these people. That's what they signed up to do.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't try to poo-poo on that. You
No.
know, when they come in and say, I want to deploy, I want to go forward, I want to get into the fight. They do. That's why they signed up.
Yeah. And this thematically, you know, this has always been important to me. You want that hunger. You know, we talk about it all the time. You know, talk with General Evans. People signed up to do certain things. It's important. Like, I'll never forget, and I think you made a great comparison. So when I was in Panama and doing all this stuff, I do remember thematically lieutenants talking about, God, what are we doing? Because Kosovo was going on, and you're like,
I don't want the Kosovo mission.
yeah,
I want this mission.
Yeah, but you're thinking about, man, we're doing all this training, but you know, are we doing something? You're thirsting for it, and that's why we want you.
Those are the people we want.
Right.
Yes. And need.
Yeah, and so you need that. And you know, the world did change, and then we were going back to back to back. But actually, you know, I know you were talking about why I joined, and you know, so we're kind of doing this history. But you know, I think part of that too is it made it very easy to see where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
Right? So, like at that point, and remember now too. So you know, Carrie's at Hood too, being a pilot in command, got her PL time, and so this is all happening. You know, while this is going on. Wanting to be in the fight, to do your job.
Yeah.
Right. And then from personal to test yourself, right? Like we've been talking about it. We've done this all theoretically, but how am I going to react to that? So, you know, I think for most of us in that period, if you were to ask the question, well, why did you stay?
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we stayed.
It's
because you got to do what you wanted to do, because you got to do what you joined to do, right? But not in a selfish way.
No.
It's in if these folks have to go and deploy, if these people got to go and do something tough, I want to be the leader that's with them.
That's right.
You know? Or in some cases, you say, hey, you're the leader I want, right? So if I'm going to go have to do this, I want you. You know, I want you to be in charge, or I want you to be on my left and right.
That's right.
Right. It's that leaders aren't always like, you don't get to choose to be a leader. People choose to follow you as a leader. And so when enough people come up to you and say, if we got to go to combat, you're the one I want up front, You're the one I want
That's
on
right.
the left and right. That's powerful, right? When enough people put their hand on your shoulder and say, I want you if we've got to go, that's going to be the fire that keeps you in shape, that keeps you studying, that keeps you learning, that keeps you going to the schools.
Yeah. The purpose, the why. Right? Even now when I think about where we are, priority is exactly right. Are you lethal? Are you ready? Hasn't changed. I think we got lost a little bit. People, we latch on to, words and terms, and, that thematically, that is what I've tried to do, right? The problem set is not that hard. Are you ready to go? And have you gotten enough reps and sets that you're lethal? So when the nation calls you to fight and win our nation's wars, you can provide lethal and ready formations and lead them, right? Train them, fight them, and win. And that thematically, trying to get in the fight, but after that, then, you're taking company command and you're doing all these things, right? That there is no question that was the purpose here. It is materialized, the convergence of all this, of what you've been doing. Now we got to put this into action.
Yeah.
However, even below the line for me, and, I bring in this point as we're talking about being a junior leader and struggling with, what I think a lot of folks are doing, okay, I get the training, but, the other thing that, and I do want to highlight what also kept me driving, there was some negative stuff that kept me driving to stay in the fight too. So, this happened years ago, but even when I was in Panama, all that goodness I got from that, I had some challenges too with leaders. Back in the 90s, zero defect, how are we measuring success? Like, you have 100% of your equipment, right? Your stats, all that stuff, battling that culture, right? That totally changed. It's still important, but it changed when we entered this 2 decades of combat. But I do remember that was another driving factor as a lieutenant becoming a captain. I had some friction in my first unit just watching leaders that I'm like, I don't know if these are the leaders we need.
Yeah, our soldiers deserve.
Yeah, and
maybe better.
While I'm not perfect, I'm like, man, if I'm ever in that position, I'm not going to do it that way. So I wanted to mention that because, right, you can look back and it's rosy, but, I was put under a lot of pressure from that.
I love that phrase, if I'm ever in position to change something like that or to do something like that. I love that phrase that you said and it pushed you. I've got 2 situations where that exact phrase came out of my mouth. Number 1, I was a private. I was on a machine gun. I was out at JRTC. We put in the machine gun position and I said, hey, Sergeant, what's the next big thing? Like, when are we moving out? And he said, shut the fuck up, just pull fucking security. Yeah. And you can fucking worry about what we need to do when the time comes. And I went, okay. Yeah. And I said, if I'm ever in position as a sergeant to do something like that's not our people are going to know what's next.
Right.
So that's a question I ask every private, even as the COG. I go up to them and say, hey, what's going on the rest of the day? And if the way they answer that question, I know everything I need to know about their chain of command and their squad leaders and platoon leader. The second one is later on, I'm a sergeant with Art Kandarian in JRTC. Yeah. We're out there, we're doing it. And I said, hey, why are we not getting this like realistic feel, this thing like this? And someone said, hey, we're just pawns. Like, we're just out here. We're just out here as like a training tool for like the battalion or the regiment, to get something. We do the airfield seizures all the time with the Rangers, right? We jump in, we go and seize our objective. There'd be no OP4 there. Yeah. And I was like, where is the OP4? Like, why are we not doing this? Why do we not have miles gear or something like that? And they're like, well, we're just pawns, LeClaire. Like, what we do, what you do isn't that important. This is about the bigger training objectives. Yeah. And I said, if I'm ever in a position to affect that, people won't feel that way. And now I'm the COG. And now I can make sure that those privates and sergeants don't feel that way.
Yeah.
We can have bigger training objectives, right? 100%. But we're good enough to do both.
Yeah.
The soldiers don't need to feel like they're just pawns in this game. Those are the 2 times where I've said those phrases, and here I am, here we are in a position to not make people feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you a short story. So, loved it. Arrived Panama. 7 days later, I met JOTC in Fort Sherman. Pretty funny. My platoon sergeant, time sergeant, first class Dorsey, amazing. But he really set me up for success. I arrive. What's the first thing I do with the platoon? We do a PT test. We do a 12-mile road march. He's testing me, right? I'll never forget. It's the Friday before we go, and he's like, "Sir, I've got the op order." I'm like, "No, I'd like to do the op order." He goes, "Okay, so you mind if I review it?" So he reads through it. He's like, "Hey, sir, you need to brief the whole platoon." Okay. Generating opportunities for me. So fast forward, we're at JOTC. I'm the newest lieutenant in the battalion. Gets around the horn that the first initial mission is, hey, we got to set conditions. So, we talked about this at Echelon. So he goes, hey, your platoon has been chosen to insert behind enemy lines to set conditions for the battalion. And how we're going to do that, we're going to get the Marines with their Boston Whalers. You're going to load up at 02. You're going to head out into the ocean, insert, we used to be called, I think it was, Area Blue, off the mouth of the Chagres, come in, insert, and then, get up, insert battalion retrans, and then fight up to this position until the entire battalion can join you, and then we're doing a battalion attack. So huge mission. So, all we talked about, I'm under a lot of pressure. So, I'm sitting, we're reviewing this with my squad leaders. And again, I'm telling you, these guys own their unit. Here's what comes out of all of this. Because, that JOTC, you would do all the jungle survivor, you do scout swimmer course, waterproofing. This is my first time dealing with risk. And I'm apprehensive. Because basically what I'm getting from the squad is like, sir, based on the experience of this platoon and us never doing this, this is high risk. So here I am, Second Lieutenant Williams. From a personal standpoint, I'm like, man, we've been selected to be the main effort. Now I've got NCOs telling me this is high risk. What does that mean? And the platoon sergeant looks at me. It's like, well, sir, we'll do the risk assessment, but it's your call. But this probably needs to go up to the company commander. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right. So I write it, high risk. And, I didn't know where that goes, but, just like now, if it's high risk, it's got to go beyond the company commander.
Yeah.
Never forget. I bring it to the company commander. He reads it and he's like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you want to be a platoon leader in this battalion? And I'll never forget. He's like, okay, if you feel that strongly, take it to the 3. 7 days, I'm a PO. So I'm sitting there. Now I'm like,
you're questioning yourself.
I'm like, what the heck? I don't even know what a battalion S3 is. 7 days.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. So I go to the battalion 3. Same response. Don't be a blankety blank. You're going to do the mission. So I come back from this, but hey, I signed the risk assessment. High risk. They're like, and I'm trying to offer, hey, is there any way I can maybe air insert these guys? And everyone's telling me, you are crazy. Why would you even bring this up? Yeah. This, and this. 7 days. So I go back to my platoon. I'm like, all right, hey, they have the risk assessment. We made it known the risk, but they told us to do it. So what do we need to do? So here we are, this small group, and they've got a lot of experience. How do we make this as safe as we can and still accomplish the mission? What are the SOP for overwater movement? And I'm drawn on Ranger School. Okay, so we'll tie off weapons to LBEs. We'll lash stuff to the boat. Yep. This and that. We'll have radios. We only had like 4 of those pluggers, huge GPS. Like we'll do a route. Guess what happens? Now the whole battalion leadership is out at the dock at 02. And I'm getting...
You're the only platoon.
Yeah, and I'm getting kind of like, you going to be okay with this? And I'm starting to get fired up. Like, I thought my job was to elevate risk, but you guys are telling me I'm, whatever. We get in the boats. Boats are sitting pretty deep because we've got all our gear to survive for however long. So I'm the third boat order of movement. So we go off without a hitch, and again, I'm kind of just questioning like, oh, I have not made a good impression. But on the flip side, my NCOs are like, hey, sir, well done. That's what we need you for. And this would start my trajectory for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
But of course, what happens, we hit the checkpoint for the turn to go into the Chagres. I hear an engine come out of the water. A boat flips.
They hit a wave, flips over.
Yep. So basically they're hydroplaning. He cut the engines. Tip of the boat goes into the water, ejects a Squad Plus into the mouth of the Chagres. We're about 1 kilometer offshore. I get the radio call. So first thing I'm doing, I'm like, all right, hey, need a location. Luckily, they had just done a checkpoint check-in with me. So I'm like switching to battalion, company freak. I'm like, we've got a boat in the water. Here's the grid. So we pull up, I got people injured. Guy gets his orbital socket crushed by a 240 machine gun. Team leaders had jettisoned their equipment to pull. I mean, there's some heroic stuff, but luckily I had the grid, get accountability. And here's the kicker, this could go on and on. I call it up and then I find out, hey, sir, we've got two M4s unaccounted for. I'm like, all right, just give me a roll up. So 3 casualties, 2 pieces of equipment. I send it up. The response, you lost equipment? Unbelievable, right? I've got wounded soldiers. It's in the dark. I think Jack Cousteau's son was eaten by a shark in that
Chagres,
same place.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there going, are you fucking kidding me? That's what we're worried about? So like I throw the hand mic down. I might RTO monitor that. So anyway, we get everyone loaded in my boat. We're starting to do this stuff. We get to shore and we did. We had 2 weapons in the drink.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, we're sitting there and I'm getting with my NCOs and I'll never forget. They're like, hey, sir, whatever you need us to say, we'll say. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, well, sir, I'm like, you guys did everything right. You tell them the truth. And I walked off. And I get on the radio and, we're evacuating our casualties. And this is what I asked for. I said, hey, sir, I know we're supposed to SP immediately. If I could just get an hour just to reset, get, 100% men, weapons, equipment. I got some guys and they're like, move the fuck out.
Start moving.
Yeah. No shit. Okay. NCOs are watching me. I didn't know this until later.
Yeah.
7 days I've been in a platoon. I never forget, a captain comes down. He's like, hey, I'm the investigating officer. He goes, you're probably not going to be a platoon leader at the end of this. I'm like, okay, gotcha. And we don't have any time to reset. So we're getting everyone together. Little did I know. So we had done the Scout Swimmers course with the Marine Corps, and we had certified a bunch of my guys. Just from that 7-day interaction with my NCOs, without me knowing, a group of NCOs got back on a boat, went out to where we had dumped, and they went and found those weapons. They were tied off to LBEs. Somehow they had settled at about 20 feet, 5 feet.
Uh-huh.
They recovered those weapons. So by the time I'm SPing, one of my squad leaders comes up and he's like, hey, sir, we got those weapons. You can tell the battalion company.
Dang.
And I'll never forget Lincoln, battalion commander, gets on the ground later on. And this stuck with me. And talk about drive, like, I'm never going to do that. He's like, hey, Williams, heard you had some fuck ups on this last mission. You know, maybe we'll give you an opportunity to re-earn your Ranger tab. And dude, my switches flipped after that. And I tell that to you because as we talk about risk, we talk about leaders using the rank for good. I'll never forget the quote coming out of that because I was put under investigation.
Yeah.
My platoon had the best platoon of the rotation from the OCs. Meanwhile, the command is like, yeah, we had leaders cut corners, could have been a great rotation. And I'm literally sitting there in the, you know, at the end going, dude, I'm persona non grata. The output of all that, the NCO chain of concern was behind me 100% of the way. And that year was about showing them we were good. Number one platoon in exavals, number one platoon live fire. I made sure I was true blue EIB. And I was driven by that. Now, at the end, the 2-star came down, investigated, like Kevin did everything right, but that taste in my mouth, that chain of command distanced themselves from me, would formulate my glide slope on how I would be the rest of my career.
Yeah. With that story, it gets right into this bucket that we're talking about. And you always talk about reps and sets, and you talk about the opportunity to do the little things right along the way, right? And about some of the special people that you've had in your life, you know, along the way, right? That bucket is kind of the main theme of our tribe, right?
Yeah.
And what it makes to be special. Talk about like there's a big delineation of what you just said about you doing the right things, following the SOPs, doing the checklists, lashing things down to the boat because of the people that are in that boat, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And absolutely not because you were worried or we are worried that someone's going to do an investigation.
Right.
We've both seen both sides of those things, right? Where we're going to do this to cover your ass. You're going to do this so that when there's an investigation 6 months or a couple months from now, that when something goes wrong, you'll be covered.
Yeah.
No, that is not why we do it.
Yes.
We do it because when a boat flips, we do it because when there's a static line injury.
Yes.
We do it because when we hit a drop zone and only half the people get out and then all of a sudden there's a red light, that's why we do tactical crossloads.
Yes.
You know, it's not so somebody can check it later on. It's so that we will survive, even in training, right? So that we will live in training or in combat, or we'll be prepared for combat, right? And we can trust those people. Talk about the differences and why we do it for the right reason.
Yeah, let me start at the big picture. And they used to do this at the battalion commander PCC, and I forget who said it, but I'll start with this, and this should ring true. I forget who had talked about this. I hope they still do it, but we had someone talk about, as a leader, there's going to be times you're going to have to make a decision that personally will not be good for you, but it's not about you. You know, I used to say this all the time. It's not about you. It's about your unit. You're going to have to make tough calls to accomplish the mission, and it's going to put risk on you. Risk to self, right? We always talk about risk to mission, risk to force. What you can have happen is this, if I do this, I'm going to be perceived this way. I mean, there's an art to that, but so, yeah, are you doing it for the right reasons? You know, and I think especially as you reach battalion and brigade command level, it's not about you. You have a responsibility to get these people ready so they can survive and accomplish the mission and get as many of them home as you can. And that takes decision, right? Inherently, what we do is extremely dangerous. We are asking leaders to manage chaos and violence, right? And there's going to be death. There's going to be killing on both sides. And you have to be making calls that are taking care of your people to put them in a position of advantage to win that fight and bring as many people home. So, I bring up the 90s because I can see us going there where it's like, oh,
I think we're already there. I think we are in the 90s.
You've lost a piece of equipment. Yeah. You're no good. Is that the message we want? Or we want the message, listen, you need to get that equipment into the field under pressure at night under combat condition to train and fail in training. And I got your back. So when it is real, you're not like, ooh,
worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah. Hey, if we take that out and it gets broke, I'm going to have to pay for it. What? Right?
Yes.
And so I think as we move forward, and you're talking about tribes, and we come from the same tribes, and that's why it's so important, because you learn good and bad from the leaders you have, and you have to have the emotional intelligence, the intellect to go, you know what? That's exactly right. So, we talk about, near and dear to the hurricane, Arcandarian. I was very fortunate. He had taken over the battalion that I was in that had just come back from OAF 1, when he came to the 101st, and I was a company commander for him. And I'll never forget, I was on my way out, I had already been assigned to somewhere else. I was a senior commander, and he had asked me, hey, we're going to JRTC for this. I want you to come. I mean, I was done. I'm like, of course, sir. Because, I just come back from Iraq. I had opinions. I had felt like we were too TTP focused. We need to get back to fundamentals. And I'll never forget that, right? So here I am. I don't know him from Adam, but he's like, I want you to come. So we're in that crucible together. And, I learned a lot about that risk in making decisions and it is about the war fight. This other stuff, it's ancillary. Can you fight? Can you win? And I'll never forget, there was a mission. I forget what part of the box, but I get a call from him and he's like, Kevin, we got a mission come up. You have 2 hours. I'm sending you multiple platoons. You're the C2 for this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Roger that, sir. So I get this unit in. I forget how much time we have. My XO is trying to do the math. Yeah. I'm like, hey, I'm going to issue a VOCO order. Most important thing we're going to do is rehearse and do PCCs and PCIs and comms check. So these elements come together. I'll never forget. He shows up. He's just standing there. This is the first time he's seeing me in action. We do it. We do the mission. And there was a lot of risk there. But I'm not worried about, I'm a senior commander and I just been in Iraq. I'm like, I know what I need to do. Right? I don't have time to publish the 5-paragraph op order. I'm going to cover the topics, but we're going VOCO. And the most important thing we do is get reps and sets, actions on the objective, work comms, work fires. Let's go. Giddy up. And amazing enough, from that point on, the tribe of leaders I had would be phenomenal because they all understood what was real and important, still balanced that other stuff, but really came down to the war fight, Hodges, fighting Joe Anderson, Kandarian, Walrath, Gerard, right? So, and, we always joke, I mean, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and I was just fortunate. And, you fast forward later, you prove yourself, you understand about risk, and it wasn't always easy. You'd elevate stuff, and that's why I used that story when I was a PL. Like that shifted. I'm like, that's my job.
Right.
My job is to get these ready, and if I can't handle the risk, I elevate it. But if we're going to go, we're still going. That's our job.
Right.
So you can't be wringing your hands, but you have a responsibility to let leaders know, here's the risk, this is the outcome. But guess what? At the end of the day, you tell me to take that hill, I'm going.
Yeah. Talk about, so the next area of this, reps and sets, right? We're sticking with reps and sets. We're sticking about the special people, right?
Yeah.
That you've had. You've had some of these experiences, platoon leader, company commander, JRTC, and now you've been deployed multiple times. You've seen some terrible things happen, in combat. So these things are all sitting in the back of in your mind, right? And you now have this, combine that with the vision that you had from the beginning, right? And where you want to take organizations. You know what's necessary in order to be successful. Reps and sets, you say it. But there's a lot of people that are sitting there going, I don't know what you mean by reps and sets. I don't know what you mean by anticipate things. Yeah. There's a couple examples that ring true in my mind of reps and sets. The fire support coordination exercise, Warrior Forge, Warrior Shock, right, where you go out there and you created these opportunities for people to learn what you're talking about. You said reps and sets, you said do these things, people are talking about it, but you put us in those positions, right? You said the warfighter, you're going to act like Matt, you're going to be the division cavalry. Rick, you're going to be a brigade combat team commander, out there. You saw these things way before anybody else did, and then you turned it into something that allowed us those reps and sets, How do you make that switch, or how do you implement those things from I saw these being done to me, or your opportunity to go through them in Panama. Now I'm going to create them instead of Panama. I'm going to create them in the Kahukus. Yeah. I'm going to create them at KTM. Create them in South Range. I'm going to create them for my organization. Talk about that area a little bit.
No, that's good. Yeah, I think what happens. Combat has to be the focus, right? Are you lethal at your job, and are you ready to go, right? Everything else is ancillary. This is where I do get somewhat frustrated, and I know people want to have, everyone struggles. Like, what's my intent going to be? And we're trying to look for words, words that empower people, but you got to define it. So how this started with me is like, it's very basic. We were talking about earlier, before we went on a run, right? What separates the good from the great? It's repetition. Mm-hmm. It's repetition. Whether I was wrestling or shooting, the excellent units, right, are like national mission units. They shoot every day. We were talking about kit. You can get issued your kit, but have you refined it that you can run in it? The nods fit, right? You can move at night. I'll never forget, guys would always cool guy, you have the holster on your front, magazines. I'm like, can you low crawl with that? So it starts from that. And what I found as a PL, what made us good? Because we went out in the field and we AR'd what we did, and we put ourselves under pressure. So the more I saw of that, especially when I was a company commander, and I know I used to say this to you guys, you want to be hard, you got to do hard shit. So how do you replicate the conditions to get after it time and again? So, as I defined it as a PL, I'm like, hey, the two mantras are, we've got to get the reps and develop lethal platoons. And what does that mean? It means we need to put you under pressure multiple times, force on force, add conditions in there at night, taking casualties, having to control fires. How do you react to contact? We got to do that in a live fire scenario and do that. So foundationally, I saw that as a company commander when I came back from Iraq. I'm like, let's go.
It's the same thing as a brigade commander.
Yeah. And what did I do? I issued an order every time. I published graphics. And, the whole shock blitz thing, the EDRI stuff I would do, that was that. I didn't have enough time to train. And I learned this from Hodges and Kandarian. Everyone does a Mungadai, but, I would activate you guys. Send an alert out.
That was my third day in command.
Yeah. Send an alert out.
I didn't even have a PT belt yet.
Yeah, they're like, mission, report with brigade commander for combat focused PT. Here's your packing list. And everyone's like, because I'm building resilience. I'm building reps and sets that you can be comfortable. You get a call, you don't know what's happening, and then you show up and we do something. And then I started doing it to companies, right? Yeah. Notify that company 24 hours out, be prepared for combat. And we'd go live fire them. So as you talked about that, I saw that before we went to Afghanistan as a 3. If you can do nothing else, and this wasn't mandated back then, and this is where my hat's off to those leaders. If we can do nothing else, we got to certify platoons in live fire conditions and get them reps and sets. That was not the mandate back then.
Right.
And, the fire coordination exercise, that was another event. I'm like, how do I replicate? You're getting an A-10 checking on station. You're getting a AH-64. You got bombers in the air. And now you're getting hammered with different problem sets to calm them, to give them a rep and set. And I'll never forget, a couple of you came and Lou said, he's like, sir, I felt like we were in Afghanistan. I'm like, that's the point. Because if we don't do this, the first time they're going to see it is in combat. So yeah, I know I talk about it all the time, but it's like doing platoon live fire once a year is not enough.
Yeah. And you did it right when you get to combat and someone says that was a lot easier.
Yeah.
That was a lot easier in combat than it was at the FSCX.
Right. Because, and again, nothing is original thought, but right. You sweat and bleed in training because you control the conditions and you got to amp it up.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll never forget. I used the Blitz program as one. And I know you weren't there. When I took command, just to set the tone, they're like, sir, you want to do brigade run? I'm like, no, this is what you're going to do. I want you to alert the battalion command teams to report in their combat gear at the brigade headquarters tomorrow morning, prepared for combat focused PT. And I'm going to lead it. What, sir? Yep, do it. And everyone's freaking out because they haven't met me.
What does that mean?
Right?
What's the uniform?
So what do? Stretcher carry, 2.5 miles. We're on the obstacles. And then I brief my command philosophy. Then the very next day, call all the field grades and their NCOs. We did it again. And then the last one, call all the commanders and first sergeants. So in 3 days, I got reps and sets. They understood what I was all about. And I said, what we just did is what I'm talking about. And it's going to go more from this. And, I learned that from those tribes. I'll never forget doing something similar with Dan Walrath. Hilarious. We did like a 72-hour with a company. This is hilarious. You'd love this. And, we're trying to do multi-echelon training too, right?
Right.
Like you
reps. Can do both.
Yeah, you can do both.
We can do both.
But there is a focus. And I'll never forget the 4s like, hey, sir, we're going to do a aerial resupply, at 36 hours in. And he's sitting there and he's like, to do what? He goes, well, sir, we're going to deliver, MREs. And we're just like, we don't need food. And I'm laughing because I know what he's getting at. And everyone's like, oh my gosh. And so afterwards they come to me and Brendan Raymond was the XO and we're giggling because, we had been doing this forever. And they're like, sir, no food. I'm like, listen, he's building grit. He's putting people under controlled conditions that you do not need food. You can still do 26 point whatever miles it was and operate because we are creating conditions they may find when they go fight. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's risk. Always rots back to risk. And so for better or worse, I've always had a clear vision that you need to focus on what's real and get opportunities for young leaders. Because when I was a lieutenant, I didn't have my CIB. I had never stepped foot. And so what made us good back then, Matt, and I know you went through it, the level of training that you did when we first pushed out, that's all you had. And so that's why even today, I love what General Evans is doing. It's like, dude, brilliant at the basics. Mm-hmm. And I think we get enamored with these other things, these kind of cute things that are still important, but they are not getting after warfighting. So, that's right. That training glide slope starts with that vision. And, it's based on my experience. Like, I need to give those platoon leaders and company commanders under pressure, reps and sets with harsh conditions day and night. So it's the first time they see this is not when bullets are flying and people are dying and there's screams.
Yeah.
You got to make them comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think, as I was very proud of the formation, we went through that train up. And, some people were doubting it. They're like, what is he doing?
Why is he? I can hear the voices right now. Why are you worried about things at such a tactical level?
Yeah.
Why are you worried about things that are at such a low level that other people can take care of? Right. What you're saying is not mission command. Right. You need to let other people handle those things, but they can handle them. You can trust them to do it, but you got to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's what needs to be trained, and that's the focus.
And we talk about this in big hand waves. We say, hey, the most prepared you were going into battalion command. It's phenomenal. The Army system gives you, and if you stay on that path, the reps and sets, how many, and let's take combat out of it. CTC rotations under pressure. Rep sets at echelon. You're a company commander, you're a lieutenant, it's a grinder, but you should pull lessons from that. And this is where I know we used to talk about leader professional development. And some would say, well, when you're at echelon, you need to be looking up 60% and then 40%.
Right.
Your mission is to train and get that formation ready for combat. So you still need to do that. You still need to keep your hire informed. But your responsibility at the end of the day, this is when I talk risk to self, you need to make sure they're ready. Because, those phone calls that you're going to have to make, you don't want to be second guessing, man, I should have gave him another rep.
Yeah, or created a rep in the first place.
Because you can control it. So, when we went through it, I'm like, we are going to rotate these companies. I'm the senior observer. Do leader development to show them what right looks like because of our experience. Share that.
That's right. Show them first.
Certify your leaders and then put them under pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And see how they react. And then AR it and it develops the next thing. So, foundationally, and what it teaches folks too, when you have those good discussions, we were talking earlier about, sharing those lessons learned, it's foundational. Because I used the FSCX in those reps because, I had left command by that time. I think the biggest compliment I ever heard when Neil had taken the unit to Lightning Forge, when your predecessor said, I had never seen better trained platoons and companies than this rotation. That's a win.
Yeah. Victory.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a win.
Yeah. We talking a lot about the tactical side. We're talking a lot about the platoons and the live stuff, right? But there's other opportunities that you've had in your life, or maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, right? We talk about the Red Hill. We talk about your time with the JTT. We talk about now you're going to have other opportunities, Pentagon, stuff like that, right? How do you take those kind of opportunities and how do you season those opportunities, anticipating things out in front, building teams? That was one of the first things you hit me up was the first thing you got that challenge with Red Hill. You built the team.
Yeah.
You went out and you said, how do I put the right people on this bus, right?
Yeah.
How do I figure out who are the right problem solvers and the right people with the right attitude to build these teams? First, build a team. Second, now it's go time, right? So instead of like lethal platoons, it's how do we communicate lethal? How do we share information lethal? How do we develop systems lethal, right? Talk about those kind of special exercises, special experiences, any one of them, and how you kind of did the same thing.
Yeah. Well, let me start with this. There are a couple reasons why I ended up in those places. Number one. And it's two-part. One, building tribes, building reputation. And let me back it all the way up. So, after I'd served with Art for that short period of time, you fast forward later, and this will make sense once I close this up. I went off to broadening assignments. I went to the Pentagon. I did some higher echelon stuff. And, Carrie's like, hey, I want to go end up on the West Coast. Let's go to JBLM, do some striker stuff. I'm like, oh, yeah, let's do something different. Because, I'd been in the 101st back-to-back, company commander. Art Kandarian calls me. And he's like, Kevin, we're going to war. I need you. And I'm like, Roger that, sir. And so I called Branch and I'm like, I'm going to strike. He asked me to come because we're going to war. So I just keep that in your mind. So yeah, after I finished at the division, you know, I had to get joint and I go up to Indo-PACOM. And it was very similar. You know, a man who's a great mentor for mine, Admiral Wade, he's the J3. I was going to go up to the front office at the com. And I kid you not, I arrive up there. You know, that was a black book assignment and, you know, checks all the blocks. And he calls me. He's like, hey, I need a director here in the J3. I need you down here based on what I'm seeing your experience. He hadn't met me. I'm like, Roger that, sir. And I remember telling some folks, like, Kevin, you're passing up a black book. I'm like, well, he needs me. And he says there's work to be done, problems to be solved. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so you fast forward later, you know, here's a Navy admiral.
Yeah.
And we're grinding. And then the Red Hill thing comes up. It was exactly the same. Like, we're setting him up to go transition to that. And he goes, Kevin, I want you to be my chief of staff. And I'll never forget, a lot of peers and mentors are like, dude, that is high risk. Like that could not go the way it's going. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
There's a wicked problem here. Yeah, of course I was uncomfortable, but dude, it's like going to war.
Yeah, and it's special when someone puts their hand on your shoulder. If they're the right person, if you've already built trust and they know who you are and it's about reputation, it's hard to say no to somebody when they ask you that.
And I think, and you know, and you've got to live with that. Like, and it goes to purpose. At this level now, we talk at the lower echelon. To me, it was very simple, and it's still simple. Like, you need to do it, but what do we need? Leaders. We talk about it. You want to be at the point of friction. You want to be the main effort where the odds are stacked against you. That's what we've trained you to do. So whether that's powering through, am I hurt, am I injured? Where do I need to be? That's what the Army's trained me to do. So yeah, going into Red Hill, totally different. I remember the Navy guys were like, so are you an engineer? I'm like, no, I'm an infantryman. But what I can bring is solve problems. I don't need to know the specifics, but I'm going to build a team. And it was exactly as you talked about the tribe. When I was at Indo-PACOM, I saw the talent. And that was one of the biggest things I did. I'm like, before I left, I by name picked this core group for this problem set for the Admiral to drive that. And yeah, it may not be live fires, but like, here's the problem set. This is what we got to do. Let's get after it. Right. And empowering those guys, it's high risk, just elevate it, but we got to go. And so, you know, that was great. And one, you know, especially in the time now for me, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? How I need to put myself out there to help the team be successful. And it gives you great satisfaction, you know. And then the next mission, it was the same thing, you know, for that joint team that they put together. You know, I had like a week, and you know, General Flynn calls me. He's like, "You're going," and you know, same thing. Like, this could go either way, right?
Yep.
It could go either way. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there next week." And so, week later, go over, and you're gone for a year. But that's what we do, you know, and I think those experiences about all the things we talked about, that's the most important thing now, right? Yeah. Are you using your rank for good? Can you cut through stuff to get to decision? Can you take that risk on to accomplish the mission? It's no different from being forward in combat, right? That's what we want leaders to do. Absorb that, elevate it. And so, you know, I have been very fortunate, and I know, you know, this has all come to end. I've been out here a while, but, you know, I kind of told myself and my leaders, like, if you want me, you know, on the team, I want to solve big problems. And there is risk with that, but that's what we've been training for, right? Whether it's deciding who the main effort is for, you know, a time sensitive target downrange. Like, guess what? You pick people that you trust. You pick people that if you lost them, it would hurt, but you're doing it because you know it's the right thing to do. So I've been very lucky and humbled to have those opportunities. But I tell you, all those jobs, everyone's like, why? Which reinforced, like, I'm doing it then.
That's why I'm the right guy for that job.
This is what I've done.
Yeah.
And it even goes back to foundationally to that experience as a lieutenant. Like, I'm not going to shy away from it. We don't avoid risk. We dive into it. We make it happen. Because achieving results at the end of the day is what we're all about.
Yeah, when it's challenging, be there, right? But when it's risky, you lead it.
And trust me, it's not comfortable. You know that. I mean, I have imposter syndrome every day. But it kind of is what makes this a great profession. Yeah. Right?
That's our tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last couple things that I want to kind of talk about as we kind of, start our initial descent is like what today, today's Army, we obviously it's no surprise, recruiting and retention. We talk about talent management, and then we get into the last thing is like the so what? Like, so what? We've had this conversation, and we've been talking a lot of things. What's got you fired up right now? Like, what are you looking forward to the most about the next few months?
Yeah, I love to see where we are going, and it's thematic through everything. It's super special to be at the tactical level right now and watching, people getting after it. And you mentioned retention, like doing our job. I'm fired up that, one, we're part of tribes that recognize that warfighting readiness, warfighting lethality are it. And that gives me great hope and optimism, right? Because there are always times you sit back and like, am I the crazy one? No. Right? Like our tribe, our coaching trees, that's all we've done. And so I'm excited that, the leaders that we've touched who are about to head into command, they know that because we trained with them and they've got the mantle now. They're carrying their torch. The Trivius Caldwells, the team here, and I just named one of many, the John Myers. Guess what? They're part of our tribe, right? Yeah. They're part of our tribe. I'll send a note to Art and Darren every once in a while. Like, that still is living in those formations.
Yeah.
And what I do love today is that, General George, Chief of Staff of the Army, he's laser focused on that too.
That's right.
And now it's getting the frozen middle to get back in alignment. General Evans talks about that all the time, alignment. I don't think there's been a better time where we're aligned from top to bottom that warfighting lethality is the number one thing. So now it's inherent on, the things you're doing to share. What does that mean? This little discussion about it's not that complex. You're battalion commander, make lethal platoons. This is how you do it, right? Mm-hmm. Lay it out. Training meeting, 8-step training model. Like, get them the reps and sets. Readiness, what is that? Physical fitness, right? These are the metrics. These are the important things. Make decisions about what you're not going to do, but you're aligned. And so I am very optimistic that, we are on track, and now it's just, right?
Yeah.
Helping people realize that, and our leaders being there to train those guys on what we know. It's not perfect, but this is where we can bring, I'm very grateful, my ability to talk to young field grades and just share that. And it's the good and the bad, but just that focus I'm really excited about that. That is a huge opportunity for all of us. So your role that you're providing, your experience, right? Like that gives me great joy and purpose because you're seeing it. Now it's just the eaches, right?
Yeah, I love how that gives you the fire, because it gives me the fire too, being that this isn't my first couple of years in the Army. And I want to read something because it's stuck with me for a while now. And I gave you this book a little while ago, and the book is Tribes by Seth Godin. Right. And I'll say I want to read the paragraph, but then I'm going to tell you what year this book was written. Right. And he's speaking about the music industry, but you can scratch out the music industry and you can kind of put whatever industry that you think that this applies. And it says, page 96, I know this is hard to believe, but the good old days are still yet to happen. Even for those, and I scratched it out and put in the Army, even for those in the Army, the thing is, the guys who ran it in the old days won't be around when this regroups because they won't be welcome. And the point is that when you get back to something like warfighting and there's people that are uncomfortable with it, I think they're the ones that are in that category. They wanted to see it go a different direction. Right? Yeah. But now that it's regrouping and it's coming back around, the people that are a part of that warfighting tribe are not only excited, they're on fire because that's why they came in.
Yeah.
That's why they stayed, right? That's why they believe that they're here now, is to be a part of that warfighting culture, to reinvigorate the warrior ethos, right, inside of our Army. And you got the track record that shows that you've been able to do it at all the different levels, and I'm fired up to do it. I'm fired up to create it even more now today than ever.
Yeah, 100%. No, it is. And I love the arc. Why you get in, and it can be for different reasons, but that singular purpose, the fighting and winning our nation's wars, and how that translates down to the echelon, platoon, company, battalion, brigade, division level. It's why we exist. And you should be proud of that. And you should embrace it. And if you don't know, ask somebody. And I think that there's a certain amount of humility, even what we did. We went to combat, but the future of warfare, exponential. And that's okay. But just focus on the reps and sets that you can do, right? Like, if you got to make a decision on, studying the effects of microplastics or, getting a speaker to talk about, this and that, or it's focused on warfighting, focus on the warfighting. You're going to be okay because at the end of the day, that's your job.
Yeah.
Right? I think all this other stuff, and I'm not trying to poo-poo doing these other things that are grandiose, but those are not the fundamental things, right? How do you take your experience, and I'm speaking to battalion commanders, brigade commanders, things you've seen, the good and bad, and translate that learning to your leaders who haven't seen it, who are apprehensive, anxious, to close the gap, right? That's what the training is. Hey, you're going to take casualty. We got to see how they react to this. How do you finish the fight first? And not get wrapped in on that, right? That's a simple example, but that needs to be taught. And I think I am excited because, that tribe, that warriors that we do have, that's what I'm excited about. That responsibility and those opportunities, and I talk to battalion commanders about this all the time. You are in the most powerful role job in the Army. Same day, you can get guidance from the 2-star senior commander, and that very day you can talk to your entire formation, and they know you by the way you walk in the jungle at night. Like, that is powerful. And that impact you have on those guys, right? I know you get it.
Yeah.
They're going to remember that. It's so foundational. So I think I am excited we just can't forget that. It's, it's a very simple problem, but now it's just making the time to do it.
Yeah.
The reps and sets that leaders need to get is putting yourself in those positions to make hard decisions, right? You have to also generate opportunities for yourself to put yourself under the crucible. And so how do you do that, right? Yeah. And I think, the preparation, I love the stuff that you do, like just the preparation you do. And I'll talk about what I'm doing now is I pick a problem. Meetings are mildly interesting, but if I can solve one major problem a day, I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
Only that I can do. So I think and that's from warfighting, right? Like thematically, and I think I've generated a culture with my team. They know they can bring me stuff, and I'm gonna get on it.
Yeah,
I will stop what I'm doing, but it's understanding, from an art. There's a lot of science, but I forget who says it, but command is 90% anticipation and 10% luck. Right? And you were talking about anticipation, right? So how do you develop that in yourself? And it relates back to risk, right? What are things that only I can do? And that's at every echelon. As a company commander, battalion commander, I talk to you guys. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the last message, how that boils down to command. Because you can get distracted by the 100 other things that you have responsibility for. But what are those one or two things? And my example is I try to pick a problem that only I can solve and solve it.
Yeah. What I try to do, and what we're doing here is we're getting ready to land the plane on so what? What matters the most, and what are those last couple things that we want to share with folks is, as you say, pick a thing, right? I like to pick the thing. Like, what are we worried about right now? What does the organization need from me the most? And as being the cog for JPMRC, what it was is they need me to help them make these exercises the best exercises that anybody's ever been a part of. That's the most important thing that we do.
That's it.
Right? The second most important thing we do is we run this JELK process, right? It's the process of getting these exercises to become the best exercise that anybody's been a part of. And what that can't be is all hands on deck for one exercise, and then when it's over, then we pick up the next exercise and we start from scratch. No, we've got to create parallel planning. We've got to be able to do more than one thing at a time. And what I'm most proud of is just 2 days ago, right? 2 days ago, we finished exercise in Thailand. Simultaneously, where they were doing the planning conference for the beginning of the Alaska rotation. Simultaneously, we were doing the D-150 brief to General Evans and you for the preparation for the exercise in the Philippines. And then the other part of the team was still preparing for the November rotation. Yeah. All at the same time. Right. We can do more than one thing. So as we start to get ready to land this plane and the so what are the biggest things that are kind of on your mind that leaders like me should be looking at right now?
Yeah, I think, and I'll use my own example, what we were just discussing. Leaders at this echelon, you have an inherent responsibility and you have the authority. There are problems that only you can solve. This goes back to our discussion on risk. In my role, I think about those one or two problem sets daily, weekly, that I can only solve, and that's my focus. So, my message to these future commanders, what are those 1, 2, 3 things that you have to be involved because only you can do it? So the preparation, you having guidance on that and being willing to make those decisions and do that. And so what's your process? You got to have a process to identify that, to separate. I love this talk about what's important, what's urgent, right? Like,
right.
A list of 20 things is not a priority. That's a list. 1 to 3 things, that's a priority. And where do you put your effort? Where are you? How I describe this, a good way to relate this to the tactical level, where's the main effort, right? Because your presence and your attention makes it important to your formation. We used to talk, right? live fires. Yeah. Platoon live fires. That's battalion commander business. You can't just wave that away. I'll give you an example for me. Like, I was all in. From start to finish, certification, all that. And I did the preparation for that. That to me is one of the most important things. The second part of that, as I tell people, the art and science of what we do. And, again, I'll quote someone, but, commanders at this echelon, your experience, your reps and sets, you need to anticipate, right? And, I forget who said it. I was just talking to one of our senior leaders this week. 90% anticipation, 10% luck. But the reps and sets you've had through your career, they generate that context. And I'll give you a very classic example. We go out to a live fire range, you and me, you can smell when something's going to be off because you have the experience, anticipation. And it usually ends up that the saw is out of position on the very left flank and firing out of the SDZ. Why?
Right.
It's reps and sets. So you have to anticipate things like this and make the call to mitigate, to weigh into it. You don't shut it down, you go. And I think you mashing that together, a successful day for me is, am I helping solve a problem for the team that only I can, for the commander, for the staff? That's a successful day. Having 20 meetings is not successful.
Yeah, I think it was General Evans that said, other people have said anticipation, but he said it was the senior leaders, your ability to anticipate things and then put things into place.
Yeah.
And the preparation that allows you to anticipate it. Why? Because you put the work in, you looked at things, you looked at the calendar, you looked at the schedule, you looked at all the different things, and then you were able to anticipate an opportunity because you were prepared.
That's
because
right.
you prepared ahead of time.
Preparation is key. But then, operating in uncertainty, you also have to know if you can't handle it, you got to raise it. And this goes back to risk, right? Is it at my level? And if it's not, you have a duty, you have a responsibility, whether it's uncomfortable for you personally or professionally, to raise that to the right level. And that, we talked about the sacredness of commanders' dialogue and, having the courage, the experience to have those conversations, and so I think, that is my biggest advice to, these future leaders of people, in that, like, it's an amazing ride. You've made it, but it's not about you. It's never been about you. And so, that anticipation, and then when there's risk there that maybe you can't mitigate, you got a responsibility, right, for your people. Yeah. To raise that and get the problem solved. Because it's not about you. It's not about that commander. It's about your people. It's about your people. And, those are two, I think, important aspects that we sometimes get caught up in the minutia. Yeah. But we got to prioritize and be, laser focused on that. Because it's about the war fight.
Yeah. And when you say warfighter, you mean fighting and winning in combat, right? And you mean the ability for people to trust you, right? They have to trust that when it's time to go, that you're going to make the right decisions on behalf of them. Why? Because they saw you do it in training, and because they saw you do it with your track record over all these years. They trust you to make those calls. Talk more about fighting and winning, warfighting, and the preparation, how are we preparing over these next couple of years? What are we doing to kind of set the theater? What are we doing to be prepared ahead of time?
Yeah. No, I've always used this term, and you got to define everything you say, focus on your fight at echelon. What do I mean by that? If you're a battalion, brigade commander, focus on that fight. There are going to be people above you that are going to worry about the other stuff. Because, this happens to all of us. You look at the problems, especially here in this theater, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of strategic. And yes, impacts what you do are strategic. But I would caution people, stay focused. right? The leaders expect you to have your formations ready to go at a moment's notice, and when you go, to fight and win. And I think we all have sometimes we can get caught up in some of the noise, right? Who's doing what with whom? And it's important, but understand who owns that and own your piece of the pie. If you can simplify that for yourself, no one's going to tell you you're not doing the right thing. I mean, if I stood up tomorrow, I'm like, I'm battalion commander. What are you doing? I'm getting reps and sets and making these platoons lethal and making sure they're ready. If the balloon goes up, they can deploy at a moment's notice, get on the ground and do their job. Mm-hmm. Who is going to question you on that?
Yeah.
Right. And, I've worked at the COCOM and there's a lot going on, but you got to simplify this process for yourself because there's just so much out there. And that's why the basics, the fundamental, doing that. And I think leader preparation, as we were discussing, if you don't have the reps and sets, how are you generating that for yourselves? How are you making sure you can make decisions based on the information you have and be confident in it? Because the worst thing you can do is not move to the sound of the guns.
Yeah.
To not have an opinion. That's what we get paid to do. You may not be right, but just getting that out there helps people iterate with you so you can be comfortable in that. How
do someone might ask this question right at that moment? They might say to themselves, I've heard so many times, right? Make lethal platoons and companies, right? But I've also heard is solve your commander's problems, right? I've also heard, solve this person above their challenges. What about the person that's struggling between too much energy towards solving the leader's problems, not enough energy towards the lethality? How do I do both? What do you say to that person?
Yeah. I fundamentally, how you solve your leader's problems? You're lethal at your echelon. You're going to solve 80% of those problems. Because if I showed up today to Lightning 6 and said, hey, my battalion, my platoons are ready to deploy tomorrow, and we're lethal because we've gotten these reps and sets, here's the quantitative measures, you've just solved most of his problems.
80% of them are solved.
Because he can employ it. Now, yes, of course, there are leader things that you can do to assist with adding to that higher echelon. Great example, we bring up warfighter, right? We help solve division problems, but we're still getting reps and sets. You can do both, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we get enamored with, to express that you can't do something or you have risk is going to make you look bad. We don't have time for that. Are you going to be worried about how you look if you've got a company in the fight taking fire, you got to get them assets? Are you not going to call higher and say, hey, we can't maneuver. I need fires now. Think about that. That is the best example I can give. Because you know what happens? And, I could piss off a lot of people. A lot of our valorous awards that are given to soldiers is because leaders put them in a position where they had to frickin' do heroic shit to get out of it because they didn't anticipate and make a decision or raise it to higher that I needed something. Mm-hmm. I intrinsically believe that. And so I get it. We all want to look and do well in the eyes of the people we work for. But I think this is where you've got to understand what's important. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about soldiers' lives. You're a parent, I'm a parent. Your number one responsibility is make sure those guys are ready, they can fight, and get as many home as possible with their limbs intact so they can live their lives. And I think if we focus on that, everything else will work out. You're going to be solving the problems. Because we talk about this. Where do you win the fight? We hear it all the time. You at the tip of the spear, you're winning it at the squad, the platoon, the company level.
Yeah.
That's how you solve the problems. That's how you win that fight in that 24 hours. Those units got the reps and sets. They're lethal. They can come out of that. You're enabling that fight. But it takes intestinal fortitude, right?
Yeah.
If you don't got it. I'll give you one example, and I know we've told a lot of stories. I'm forward in 2010. I'm the 3. We're in the Arghandab River Valley. 40% of SIGACs at that time are happening on Highway 1 in our sector. Like, people are getting hammered. We get in there, and my battalion commander is doing a battlefield circulation, and I'm the 3. I own the battle space for him, and he's about to traverse back to our headquarters. I talk with this leader all the time, and we're super close. And he asked me, he's like, "Hey, I'm coming back," and I'm like, "Sir, I do not recommend you come back at this time." And I remember inside, I didn't want to say it because I felt it reflected on me poorly. But I said, "Sir, I do not own the battle space. I do not have enough assets if something happens to keep them off of you." Right. But I told him, and, he had a pretty good element with him, and horribly, he made a decision to come back. It was the right call. I tried to put stuff over him, and he got ambushed and he got wounded. And, later on, he'd always tell me how thankful he was that I told him that. And, because it wasn't about me, it's about him, the unit. And I use that example because it's what we do.
Yeah.
Right? There's a certain amount of humility and knowing yourself, knowing your unit, but you got to be able to have those conversations. Because at the end of the day, right, it's about the people and winning, right? Elevating risk, having those dialogues. I mean, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Well, I want to give you the last couple, things to talk and end with you. But what I wanted to say was, I appreciate you taking this time with me. We talk about like those few people that are in your life that are like your 3 a.m. folks, the people that are going to answer a text message, the people that are going to come, if alive, that they would come and help, and you can count on, because you can trust them based on the things. And what I really appreciate is, one, you invest so much time in me over the years, but that you invest this time to then share it with as many people as we possibly can, right? So we can get the word out. We can share what those things are with more people than just the people that are in our direct chain of command and the people that are on our personal, board of directors. And so I wanted to say, I appreciate you, sharing so much with me all these years, and I know it won't stop, going forward, and that there'll be so many more of these conversations kind of happening. But that's how we're able to do it, right? It's because of reps and sets of conversations, right? Talking about these things, asking people the right questions, asking better questions than we did in the past, learning a little bit of something, a little bit every single day, a little bit better today than we are tomorrow. So nobody gained more from this than I did from doing this conversation. And that at the same token, if you ever needed anything from my battle space, that you're going to get nothing but the truth from my side of the battle space up towards you, to let you know what I'm seeing from my vantage point. So I appreciate it.
No, just, Matt, I mean, what you're doing here, and, I know I'm not one to do a lot of this stuff, but it is important, because this is what we're talking. We're sharing our lessons. Hopefully something can glean for it, but, my hat's off to you, the things you did in command, the impact, and this is just another, like, you are the one who can do this, which is great. And, the culture you built, I'd always laugh. I mean, you're a warfighter, balanced with empathy and building that team, but like, don't mistake that for not being a savage. Right. And I think people can learn a lot from you. So, I appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, I think I would leave, with those who are thinking about, as we discussed, it was very easier for us to make the sacrifices for our families and personally because the purpose, we were in for 2 decades, rotating in and out. But, I think for your audience, man, the purposefulness of what we do is worth it. It's worth it. And I'll never forget as we talk to folks, especially to folks coming up, and it grows over time, right? But it is always an active decision to do what we do, right? I don't take it for granted, right? We're all going to pull this uniform off at one time. So what I'd ask everyone, loving your job, your profession, it's a decision. It's a decision you got to make every day. And knowing the purpose of why we do this, to fight and win our nation wars, right? To make sure we are ready to close with and destroy the enemy and finish that last 100 meters, that's important. And, we all have bad days, but, I would tell folks, if you go and you may not do it right, I'm telling you, you'll have no regrets. But you got to make that decision every day. Every day. Am I making it better? Am I using my rank for good? Are we ready? What do I need to do to get there? And be able to change your course to focus on the priorities. Because at the end of the day, can I get out the door and can I fight and win? That's it. Very simple, and I know, and there's some science behind that, but I think if leaders focus on that and they know the so what, it's just going to make us better. Because I'm excited. I am excited, but I do think leaders owe that to their soldiers because, right, we all have sons and daughters out there, and they're serving now, and that everybody does. Everybody does. And, that is like the ultimate responsibility we have. And there is a solution for that. And that's getting after it every day. Right. And having the humility to change that if it's not working, because that we owe that to our folks. Right.
Amen.
We owe it to our folks, but stay lethal in everything you do.
Amen. Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts and better yet, demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.